And back with me tonight on Triple J is Robert Smith of The Cure. Robert, welcome back to Triple J tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. You're going to be doing your Hi-5, the easy bit tonight. Last night we talked all about yourself and the new album by The Cure. Tonight we get to find out about some of the music which has changed your life, because you're going to be dealing out your Hi-5 on the radio. But before we get into those tracks, let me ask you this. Have you bought many records this year?
I have obtained a great deal of records this year, but I must admit I haven't bought that many.
Okay.
I abuse my position with regards to getting older records. Yeah.
Oh, you criminal! All right, well we'll let you go on that count. But what have you heard this year that sort of stuck out that you've really liked?
I tell you, I like a group called Ecstasy of St. Teresa. Have you heard of them? They're a Czechoslovakian group, and they've just released a couple of records over here. Who are brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
No, what are they called again?
Ecstasy of St. Teresa.
Ecstasy of St. Teresa, wow.
Yeah, there's a group called State of Grace who've released a couple of 12 inches in the past 3 or 4 months, which are absolutely stunning. I like the Cranes' new album. I think it's brilliant. Crumbs. Apart from that, I don't know. A lot of what I've listened to, I've actually been very uninspired by. I mean, I get sent everything that people think I might like, whether it be something like Madder Rose or more well-known stuff. I don't know. A lot of it I kind of give away. I listen to it once or twice, and if it doesn't get me after 2 listens, I usually give it to some of my brothers-in-law or nephews or nieces.
Right, of which you've got plenty to give them to.
I have, yes.
Yeah. Okay. So do you like to? Is it purely for enjoyment that you sort of keep up to date with what's happening music-wise?
Yeah, I mean, I've got plenty of stuff to listen to, without adding to it. But I suppose it's a mixture of, it's always nice to come across something, or it's excellent to come across something that really hits you. It's one of the best feelings in the world to discover something that that really hits you inside. But I suppose I like to keep abreast of what's going on. If someone's getting really good reviews, I make a point of listening to what they're doing so I can form my own opinion. I think I've been involved in this bid for a radio station called XFM, which is like trying to get an alternative radio station on air in London legitimately, instead of we've been involved in it as a pirate station for a while. But so I've obviously get exposed to a huge amount of new music, but the trouble is that most of it I get like sampler tapes of maybe like 30 different artists, and I listen to it in the car, and 1 or 2 tracks interest me, and I ask for that, if there's any follow-up stuff, and a lot of that I kind of listen to for enjoyment, tinged with the idea that even if there's someone out there that might be taking music in a strange direction that I might like to follow. Copy, I was going to say. Follow, I should say.
Okay. Do a lot of people ask you for your advice into, the business and what to do and how to, how you can help them and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people down where I live, now I live here, and I'm always getting tapes put through the door and people coming round and being invited to, rehearsal sessions and things like that. But I find it very difficult actually offering advice, because my only experience of the music business is obviously comes from being in the Cure, and has been a peculiar career in a way. I mean, the only advice I ever offer is just to do exactly what you want to do, and if that doesn't sell you a lot of records, then you have to make the choice. Is that what you want? If you want to sell a lot of records and you're willing to compromise, then I can't really offer any useful advice at all, because all I was ever interested in was actually following a path through music that I enjoyed, because I figured I only had one life basically, and I didn't really want to waste it doing things that I didn't want to do.
Okay. Do you have a particular album? I was going to ask you this last night, but it's just popped to mind again. Do you have a particular album from The Cure that sort of sticks out for you? Not necessarily as being the best album, you reckon, but just the one that you feel most proud of?
It's difficult to narrow it down to one, actually, and it's even difficult once I start thinking of trying to narrow it down to 2, because I always leave them out. The 3 albums that always, if you were asking me this, I think before the Wish album, I would have instantly said Disintegration, followed closely by Pornography. I think Disintegration was the most accomplished album up to that point, but I think the Wish album's actually my favourite album, slightly ahead of Disintegration, because I think it has more variety and it has more depth lyrically. But I think Disintegration captures a particular period of the group and of my life in particular. I think it captures it perfectly. And I find I'm unable to listen to that album out of all the Cure albums. I can't ever sit down and listen to it because it's still too recent, even though it's like 5 years old now. But I think the Wish album, if I had to pick one, that, if all the others were going to be erased from memory, and that we're only left with one as a testament to what we'd achieved, I would pick the Wish album, because I think it has the greatest breadth and depth.
That must be incredibly satisfying to honestly feel that for the last thing that you did.
Yeah, I know, it's very strange. I mean, obviously we meet people through touring and various situations who hold very different opinions and who feel that the Cure never did anything good after Pornography. But I think they're unwilling to kind of admit to things ever having changed. People always want you want your favourite group to always be the same, never to compromise. But unfortunately, you also, I think, hanker after them never changing musically. I mean, even I'm guilty of that. There are certain groups I wish they didn't change, and I wish they were still there, so that I could pretend that the world was the same. But in reality, you have to change, and the world does change. But, I am really pleased that I genuinely feel that the last studio album we did is the best one that we've done. But it would be very strange to me that if it weren't to be the best one that we've done, because I feel as in anything else, there doesn't necessarily have to be that trade-off between learning your craft, so to speak, or being able to learn an instrument to know what words are going to work, and losing sight of why you initially wanted to do it in the first place, and losing that spark of invention. And I don't know if there's a secret to holding the two. I mean, it's very easy to become accomplished, but it's also, as is proven more often than not, it's easy to lose that spark. I think you just have to not practice too much. That's the secret.
Right. Yeah. It happens. It happens a lot in music. It happens a lot. You see people sort of improve technically, but God, they certainly lose something along the way. Yeah.
But I think, unfortunately, with a lot of people, they hit a point, and that's it, and that's their moment, and they capture like the mood of a summer, or they actually hit a point with the lineup of the group, or the various outside or external or internal influences, and something just happens, and there's like a perfect moment. So an obvious example, I think it's like with the Happy Mondays, just suddenly things clicked, and it was just like it was that summer belonged to the Happy Mondays. But it's much more satisfying for me to kind of keep going off on tangents, and not to ever, I suppose, be too mainstream. That's what I've always felt the mainstream means, is to actually be associated with a certain time and a certain period. It's death really for a group to be identified too easily to one particular period of time.
Okay. We're going to get into your Hi-5, but that's very true about what you say about influences as well, because I was thinking about that today. The Cure, although you would have had influences in the beginning, the Cure are the Cure. There is never a suggestion of any other bands being still an active influence upon what you do.
No.
Which is interesting.
No, I think even right at the start, these 5 songs that I'm going to talk you through, they are, you asked me about the 5 songs that changed my life. I mean, these were the first 5 that I thought of that changed my life musically as well as like emotionally, in that they represent like a very broad kind of taste, I suppose, and I think that I can spot influences from each of these 5 in what we do. But never anything too overt though, because I would think that would be pointless, just trying to copy someone else.
Okay. Well, Purple Haze, Jimi Hendrix is the first one. What about this one? Why did this one move you so much?
Well, it was the first Hendrix song that I heard. I remember my brother bringing it home as a single when I'd be 8 in 1967, and I was just awestruck by it. And I must have played it 20 times a day, day in, day out. I drove everyone in the house mad. I think my brother only played it twice, and I must have played it about 2,000 times. And I learnt everything about it. Not to play on guitar, but just to actually sing. I learnt to sing all the drum parts and the bass part and the guitar solo, and I was just obsessed by it. And it's remained with me ever since, really. That particularly the first two Hendrix albums, I Experienced and Axis Boulder's Love. I still think that for me, that's it. That sums up psychedelia, and it's also brilliant songwriting as well, which is a lot of people just, particularly when you're growing up, people talk about Jimi Hendrix just as like a consummate guitarist and he's someone to emulate and copy, and he lived a rock and roll, a wild lifestyle and all the rest that goes with it. But he's actually a brilliant songwriter and a really good singer as well. And I think that's what I like about Purple Haze. It's got elements of all that, and it's stunning guitar playing, but above all, it's like a really, really excellent song. So this is Robert from The Cure. That was Purple Haze and Jimi Hendrix. You're listening to my Hi-5 on Triple J. The next one is Time Has Told Me by Nick Drake.
Nick Drake there on Triple J with Time Has Told Me from the 5 Leaves Left album. Nick Drake, what about that one, Robert Smith?
Well, to me, he's everything that I would aspire to in kind of understated mood songwriting and singing. I think he was just a perfect example, someone who obviously genuinely felt everything he sang about, and wasn't worried about what people thought about him, and wasn't worried about being famous, and I don't know, and was very, very English, and just that, again, like with Hendrix, for me Nick Drake's like the other side of the coin. He's very quiet, very withdrawn, but sums up a kind of period, I suppose, of my life. And the first time I heard Nick Drake, I was 10 years old, so I was just becoming aware of, like the real world outside the home sort of thing, not just school, but other things going on. And it was just, I used to listen to that album, 5 Leaves Left, and it used to make me think about things. It was just a kind of background music sometimes, for a kind of reflection, which again has stayed with me ever since. I mean, I turned to that album, particularly in moments of great stress on tour. I find it's very, it kind of puts things in perspective for me. And particularly, I suppose, the fact that he had an untimely death, as with Hendrix. They were never able to compromise their early works. They were never able to put a foot wrong. And I think that there's a certain, I mean, it's a morbid kind of romanticism, but there is something attractive about that, I think.
Mm. You also, the other thing that's coming through is that you also got into music at a very, very, very young age, didn't you?
Well, I had an older brother, much older brother and sister. They were like 7 and 9 years older than me.
Yeah, but there's a lot of families. There's a lot of families who have that sort of older siblings, but at that age, music just doesn't seem to sort of hit naturally with every kid.
Well, I suppose as well, because everyone in the family played an instrument, and I picked up the guitar, and I suppose because of Hendrix. I remember like all the major albums from that period, of like the Stones albums and the Beatles, and Captain Beefheart and things, and Cream. I really liked that period in the '60s, and I felt I was part of it. I didn't, I didn't dress up like a little hippie or anything, but I really liked some of the music. I thought it was really powerful.
If you still like it today, were you an extremely mature 7 and 8 year old, or are you just a very childish 34-year-old? You know what I mean?
I just think that I've always been attracted to music that's got a certain kind of soul, not in a conventional way, but that just it's got like feeling in it. Although the next one up actually runs contrary to all of that, and it also runs contrary to my morbid romanticism about people having untimely deaths as well.
Yeah. Well, how has David Bowie's sort of subsequent career, even right up to sort of the present day, how has that influenced how you listen to his old records?
I've tried to. I went through a period where I despaired. I couldn't listen to any of his early stuff. I mean, I loved everything that he did, apart from the Laughing Gnome. But I mean, everything from Space Oddity right through to Low, I thought was absolutely brilliant. Without exception, I thought every album was masterful. And each time that the Bowie album came out, which was like regularly, like every 2 years, it really captured the mood of that year for me. And certain songs just triggered certain memories in me. And I think that's like a sign of. I mean, you're lucky if if you have memories from when you're like going through your formative years that are triggered by good songs, you are really lucky, because it means when you listen to those songs later in life, they have good connotations. It's unfortunate for people who got married to Chirpy Chirpy Cheep Cheep or something, because you're like forever cursed with having to like refresh your memory by listening to an absolutely awful song. But I don't know. I think after Low, I mean, I didn't really like Heroes at the time. I quite like some of it now, but I think after that he just completely lost it. And it's very, very rarely that I will even bother to listen to what he done. I mean, I didn't listen to any of the Tin Machine stuff. I mean, I had it played to me, but I couldn't listen to it. It was so abysmal.
What about Black Tie, White Noise?
It's just, I mean, it's hopeless, I think, compared to what he was doing before. I just think he's like I was saying earlier about someone that loses their way. I don't think he genuinely has any feeling left for what he's doing. I think in the first, like, through the 10 years of the early 70s through to the early 80s, he was incomparable, really, in what he was doing. And like with Starman, he was the first kind of glam artist on Top of the Pops. I think every person in Britain that saw that performance, it stuck with them. I mean, it's like Kennedy being shot for another generation. You just remember that night, sort of watching David Bowie on Top of the Pops. It was like a really formative, seminal, experience. And he was an icon, for a great many years. But unfortunately, should have really kind of listened to himself, I think, and stopped or done something else. Done something a bit more creative. I suppose a bit like Brian Eno, even though I don't like a lot of what he gets involved in. At least he's someone that is actually diversified, and I felt that Bowie should have really done that. I mean, he tried a few stabs at bad acting, but I mean, you would imagine that someone like that would have the wherewithal and the scope to attempt other things, but unfortunately, it's been kind of lost. I think, bogged down in the morass of this kind of rock and roll dream.
Okay. Well, nonetheless, as you said, I mean, he did put together a series of amazing albums throughout the 70s, and let's hear a track from one of them right now. As you said, Starman, from David Bowie. Robert Smith of The Cure is going through his Hi-5 tonight on Triple J. Starman there, from David Bowie. Robert Smith from The Cure is still with me tonight on the J's, running through his Hi-5. We're going to hear from the sensational Alex Harvey Band. What about this one? What sort of memories are triggered off when you hear this one again?
Well, the first time I heard Alex Harvey was I actually saw him on an arts programme on television, and I was 14 at the time. I think the Fated, the next album came out, and I think in 1974, so I was 15, and it was the first group that I sort of followed. In fact, the only group I ever followed, really. I sort of travelled around the country, and he was just probably my only real idol, for a period of about a year, maybe a year and a half. He just represented. I mean, he was like, people talk about Iggy Pop and stuff as the original punk, but I mean, certainly in Britain, the forerunner of the punk movement was certainly Alex Harvey. I mean, his whole stage show with the graffiti covered brick walls, and it was just like very aggressive kind of Glaswegian street theatre, and it was really powerful music, but it had brilliant tunes. And I suppose, again, the thing that runs through all of this stuff, even when we get to number 5, is that they're all held together. There's actually good songs. I mean, I'm I suppose, old-fashioned in that way. Through the years, I've listened to and tried to get into things like Throbbing Gristle and I Stores End and Neubauten, but when it comes down to it, I can't really listen to music that hasn't got a tune. And something like the Faith Eater, also the other side of it was that it was the first time I felt that this was like a group of my generation sort of thing, even though Alex was like quite an old man, and another one that had an untimely death. There was a resonance in what he was doing, and I think he attracted a very weird audience. I remember like seeing the concerts in 1974 and sort of skipping off school, and a very, very strange mixture of people used to go to his concerts, ranging from people of my age right up to people in their sort of mid-40s, and are kind of all held together by something. And it was the first time I'd felt the power of music, I think, of how it could actually attract people from very disparate walks of life and draw them all together, and for that hour and a half or 2 hours you could actually lose yourself completely. And it was just a really brilliant year. and it stuck with me. And I remember the power of that live performance, and I tried to always have that in my mind when I started up with my own group.
Okay. Whatever did happen to Alex Harvey?
He died through a drink-related illness in about 1978 or 79, I think.
What happened when punk hit England? Did his sort of popularity fade away pretty quickly?
Well, it was unfortunate because his first 3 albums were really heavy, really hard. I mean, there was a mixture of kind of like this theatrical stuff, but also with some very sort of serious riffing, which is kind of the link between like Led Zeppelin and the Sex Pistols in a strange way. But when punk hit, I think because he was so old, he kind of felt alienated by it and took the band more in the direction of the theatrical rather than the sort of the heavier side. And the balance, once it was tipped too far that way, they became a bit sort of like a pantomime, and they lost the majority of their fans, unfortunately. And they slid rapidly out of sight. I mean, I think they released a couple of albums towards the end of the group's life, but they've really lost it. I suppose it was, again, one of those groups that just, for a period, a short burst, just had it. They had that certain something, and then it just disappeared. No, and it definitely did disappear with the advent of punk. And once the Sex Pistols were there in '76, and everything changed. Even though looking back, it doesn't now seem like that much did change, and obviously nothing changed dramatically, structurally in the music business. It wasn't as shattering an experience as everyone believes it would be. But certainly musically at the time, it really wiped everything else away, the punk thing, and you had to sort of make the choice. You were either going to be left behind or you were going to embrace the new movement.
That was the Sensational Alex Harvey Band from 1974 with the track The Faith Healer. Before we get into number 5, Robert, just recapping in case people missed the chat we had last night, The Cure are now down to a 4-piece, as you said. I know a new album has just come out, but I'll have to ask about another album. Like, what are you going to plan to do once this year's over and you've sort of done all the stuff for the live album and the video that's around at the moment? You going to go back in the studio early next year?
Well, we're all meeting up actually at the end of this month, the 4 of us. We will be having a drunken dinner at the end of this month to because we haven't really been together socially for about, I don't know, 8 or 9 weeks now. We've been having various breaks and stuff, really to talk about what we want to do. And until we have that, I don't know. I sort of have a feeling that we will be back in the studio, probably this side of Christmas rather than the other side, because I've been writing through this summer, and I want to at least demo some stuff. I think it's really a case of everyone either agreeing on what we're going to do next direction-wise, or disagreeing to the point where we do something individually. I don't know. I really don't know. I have to sort of feel what we're going to do, and I don't feel it yet. I don't think I've had enough of a break, really, to become excited by throwing myself back into the pool, so to speak.
So does that worry you?
Not at all, no. I mean, I'm always like that. It's never worried me. I mean, but in the past, there has always been a morning when I've kind of woken up and gone, this is it. This is what I want to do. So I just wait for that wake-up call, really. I mean, if it doesn't come, it doesn't come. It doesn't bother me like that. Again, like I was saying before, I would hate to force it. I mean, we'll get together and we'll talk about what we're going to do, but if there's no real need to do it, if we don't actually feel that as a group that we want to do something, we won't do it, because it would be absolutely pointless, particularly after what the Cure's kind of built up reputation-wise and what it means to all of us, to kind of throw it away just by trying to capitalise. I mean, it's obviously what all the record companies would like us to do, is to follow up this live album, and obviously with the new studio album as fast as possible, but it doesn't work like that. I mean, we may well have an album out by next April, but it's just as likely that we won't have anything out at all next year. I don't know.
Okay. All right. Let's see how that dinner goes in a few weeks' time, end of next month.
The trouble is not actually how the dinner goes, it's whether anyone remembers what was said the next day.
What are you going to eat that night? Is that going to influence it?
Indian.
Indian?
We always take our big decisions over an Indian meal.
Robert, The Sex Pistols, Anarchy in the UK. That's your final selection in your high five tonight.
Yeah.
Gee.
Well, I felt that there have obviously been. I mean, there have been other songs in the period that we've covered, which is like 67 to 76, and there have been a number of songs since. But I figured that Anarchy in the UK was really the last time something really major happened to me and changed me, because I feel like since I've been involved in a group, and I mean the Cure was started that year in 76, that I've actually been influenced in a subtly different way, and that I've been able to, if I've been influenced by something, if I like something, I've taken it and I've used it, I've like mutated it, but I've actually done something with it. Whereas up to this point, I was just a passive, I was just like a sponge basically. I mean, obviously I was reacting in real life, but I felt kind of like slightly frustrated that I wasn't actually doing something myself. I was still stuck at school. I was having to learn things supposedly. But Anarchy in the UK, I mean, it was my last year at school. I was 17. I'd formed the group, and it was the best summer, the best summer of my life. It could have been any one of a number of songs. It was a toss-up between this one and White Riot by The Clash, which was another sort of anthemic punk song around this time. But I think Anarchy in the UK was really the first one that anyone sort of heard. I remember listening to it for the very first time at a party, and thinking, this is it, I mean, you knew straight away you either loved it or you hated it, and it polarised like the entire nation for that summer, the punk movement. That was what the best thing about it was. And musically as well, I think that, the Sex Pistols, again, a group who just had it at the right time, and just for one album, but for that one album, that one sort of burst, they were immense. Had been nothing like them, and I don't think there's anything been quite as good since, really, although there have been some fabulous groups since. There's never been a group that's really had the power that the Sex Pistols had just for that summer.